Recommendation 17 of the anti-racism framework supports putting in explicit legal protections against caste discrimination. Is that to you, Commissioner Finlay, or
to the President?
To the President. You remember, aware of that recommendation, President?
Yes.
Yep. Recently, a complaint was lodged with the AHRC by by two groups. And just bear with me one second. By the Alliance Against Islamophobia and by the Peria and Bedka Thought Circle of Australia, or PAPCHA, under the Racial Discrimination Act, against Multicultural New South Wales and the Minister, alleging caste discrimination in funding and other conduct of the New South Wales Department and Minister. Are you aware of that complaint?
I can't discuss. So our legislation, Section 49, actually has criminal provisions that prevent us from discussing matters relating to complaints.
All right.
But in general terms, I'm aware of the reason for that recommendation in the National Anti-Racism Framework and the general international and domestic law around caste discrimination I've looked at recently around issues of complaints.
Yeah, and caste-oppressed communities in this country are concerned that our discrimination law just doesn't mention them. Yeah. And the discrimination can be employment discrimination, social discrimination, just overt exclusion from community groups and spaces. And you know, I've had members of caste oppression groups say this is real in Australia and it's part of their lived experience in Australia, and our discrimination laws don't protect people from it. What's your understanding about legal protections for caste oppression and discrimination?
So this issue came to me last year, and I looked at the National Anti-Racism Framework, and you know, particularly in the Indian community, there's the imported caste discrimination that's happening in Indian community here. The Racial Discrimination Act, I'm hesitant to try and be specific here, but broadly talks about descent and social origin. And I asked for advice from our legal team looking at the international law around this, around whether we could accept complaints of caste discrimination, looking at the interpretation of those provisions in the Racial Discrimination Act. And there's some nuance to it, but our advice to a particular group was yes, we can. It hasn't been tested in Australian courts, but our view is that we should adopt a beneficial interpretation of those words in the Racial Discrimination Act that permits us to receive certain complaints of caste discrimination. I think it varies depending on the area in which the discrimination occurs in the Racial Discrimination Act, which is drafted differently from the other discrimination acts. But the recommendation is in the National Anti-Racism Framework because there is uncertainty around this and because this is a problem that should be very clearly outlawed under our discrimination laws.
And I'm not going to ask you for a full considered legal position about the extent of caste discrimination protection in other state and territory laws, but did you review whether or not it was picked up in any state or territory law?
I would need to, I can come back to you on notice around that. And obviously was consulting with particularly Commissioner Sivaraman, he's the one engaging with the most with multicultural communities in Australia and receiving this feedback.
Well, then perhaps I might, because that Commissioner's not here, Sivaraman, I may put a question on notice. Can you advise this committee about the extent to which either your complaints or your other work is finding evidence of caste discrimination and the extent to which you're able to effectively deal with complaints or those issues, given the statutory remit you're given?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.